1. When I turned 13, I'm 20 now, my family moved states and had spent the past 3 years homeschooling me and my younger brother in preparation for the long and arduous move. After the move, though, my mom decided to keep homeschooling us. She found something in our area called a co-op, which is where groups of homeschooling families get together to help teach kids. A bit like a school, but crowdsourced. We got into the co-op, as it was being founded, but all of the kids my age had known each other since diapers, pretty much. I did my best to try and make friends, but middle school and high school are shitty years to try and make friends as a new student, especially with already established friend groups. There were also other issues that prevented me from making friends, but this was the main one. Anyway, when I was 14, my mom signed me up for a class not quite affiliated with the co-op, but had quite a lot of kids from the co-op in it. The purpose of this class was to teach us kids how to navigate our city on our own, particularly using the public transportation system, as well as budget and plan trips as groups. It functioned a lot like a scavenger hunt, where the teacher would give us a list of places she wanted us to go that day, and we would plan the trip to go there as a group over the course of a week through a shared Google document. There would be one trip every 2 weeks on Mondays, and afterwards, we would post all of our pictures on the Facebook group for the class and then write a blog post about it. We only had one real rule in the class, outside of going to the places our teacher wanted us to go to, which was to always stick together, because we were getting into those sessions with no adult supervision from any parents. This was the point of the class. It was hammered in from the beginning to never leave part of your group behind. Always make sure everyone knows what's going on if we decide to split into groups. To probably no one's surprise, this was the most frequently broken rule. These classmates also rarely put in any effort into doing what we were supposed to do on these trips, planning or otherwise. Some people would do some work on the Google Doc for the planning and then do a complete 180 on the actual day of the trip. Some would simply do nothing and then suggest doing something different on the day of the trip. Ultimately, it always came down to me and 2 other students, probably my only friends at that time, to plan the trips, get everyone to all the places we needed to go, and take any pictures that needed to be taken. Additionally, the 3 of us were the GPS and map of the group, because they all flat out refused to bother using Google Maps or anything to get directions. They just stand there like, okay, so where do we go now? Adding insult to injury, to all of this, my classmates would constantly go off on their own without telling anyone. Like this was a once or twice a trip occurrence at minimum. Me and the other responsible people would be on our way to the destination, and bam, a sizable chunk, if not the entire group, somehow, would be completely missing. We'd contact them, and they'd always take a while to get back to us, but it was usually because they had gotten distracted and wanted to stop somewhere else. Usually this was Starbucks. Our trips were always massively behind schedule because of them as well. It was really fucking annoying. Add in the fact that, in part due to this, but mostly due to a lot of outside influences, my mental health tanked so badly. The only reason I stayed alive was because of my infant brother, and you've got a lot of pent-up resentment. I'm in a far better place now, by the way. I'm in therapy and on meds and have made real friends since going to college. Those days are pretty dark, but I'm generally a lot happier now. Fast forward to the end of the year, where we had our final trip. This trip was different and meant to highlight everything we'd learned that year from the class. In short, this trip was to take all our families plus our teacher on a trip around the city, picking the itinerary, methods of transportation, etc., etc. It had been decided early on that everyone wanted to go to New York City for this final class, despite NYC being a several-hour drive from where we were, a whole-ass different state, and a completely different public transportation system. Since my 2 friends ended up not being able to come in that trip as well, I ended up doing not just a lot of the planning of the trip, but pretty much going alone except for my mom and 2 brothers, one of whom was an infant and being pushed around NYC in a stroller. I spent the long-ass bus ride that I'd woken up at an actual unholy hour of the morning to catch, before 5 a.m. if I recall correctly, sitting by myself and spiraling while listening to my classmates all hanging out and enjoying themselves. We get to NYC at around lunchtime and everyone is hungry. For some reason, the class decided going to a small grocery store was the best place to get food. And me and my mom quickly clocked on that this was probably not the best place to be looking for lunch. There was little in the way of actual food you could eat as a meal there, with or without prep, so after telling the group we were going to be taking some of the other people from the other version of this class, who were accompanying us that were reasonable, we looked around the area to find some place that actually sold food. I ended up finding a really great deal a little ways down the street that was selling 2 sizable slices of pizza and a Coke for $2. I quickly go to try to tell everyone else, am ignored, and get frustrated. My mom goes over the teacher and tells her about the deal. And then suddenly, wow, everyone wants to listen now. They're gonna come and get food with us. It wasn't too long after this that I snapped. I ended up getting ignored by even the other responsible people, all while doing my best to try and get us where we needed to go in a completely foreign environment. Not too far into the trip, I decide, you know what, if you're gonna keep ignoring my help, especially since at least half of you have been benefiting heavily from it for the past year, I'm just not gonna help at all anymore. Even if you want my help, I'm gonna half-ass it. Because nothing is worth dealing with this, especially if your mental health is already in a bad place. Besides, I wanted to go back to listening to music on my dad's phone anyway. New York City is a bad place to be for an undiagnosed ND teen. The trip, naturally, turned into a poorly coordinated disaster. We didn't hit even half the places on our itinerary, ended up being separated a lot, and the experience of the New York City subway system was hell. More so for my family, because we had a literal 6-month-old infant with us, and New York's subway system is, to this day, well known for barely being wheelchair accessible in 23% of its stations. Let alone stroller friendly. I got the vibe during and after the trip that everyone else was miserable too, though. It didn't make me feel all that much better at the time, but years later, looking back, I'm very proud of how I handled that. It was one of my first steps towards not letting people walk all over me and use me to do their work for them. And honestly, good on me, I needed that. Hope you guys enjoyed, and remember, drink water, eat food, and take meds if you haven't, and take care of yourselves however you currently can. It gets better. And there's always a way to sabotage the worst people with group projects. 2. I may get some insurance-related terms confused because I am not knowledgeable about private insurance systems outside my country, which is India. My cousin is Indian and lives in India and works for a major American cruise line. His usual schedule is 9 months of work sailing around North America and 3 months of vacation time back in India. The maritime insurance company that he's insured with provides medical coverage for him. When he was on vacation in India, he tore his ACL and MCL and injured his meniscus playing football. It required a ligament reconstruction surgery and some months of rehab before he was fit to work again. There is public healthcare in India, but for something like knee ligament reconstruction, it still costs money, although not as much as private hospitals. And also takes time, as there is a waiting list. So he decided to go private, which is costlier. He contacted the insurance company to confirm his eligibility to receive coverage, and they confirmed that he was indeed eligible. So he went to an arthroscopic surgeon and got a letter from him detailing the estimated cost of the surgery, the date, and other relevant medical details. He emailed the details to the insurance company and they approved the surgery. Only one problem. They insisted on direct billing to the doctor. Now, doctors in India are familiar with direct billing, but it's mostly with insurance companies that operate domestically in India. Naturally, the doctor was hesitant to accept the arrangement despite receiving a letter of guarantee from them. He simply wasn't convinced of the legal validity of a letter of guarantee from a foreign insurance company in India. What if they, for some reason, refuse to pay? He can't do anything about it. So at this point, my cousin stepped in and suggested to the company that he'll foot the bill up front and then submit a claim. after which the company can reimburse him. The insurance companies seemed to agree at first, but this medical cost containment company they were partnered with was vehemently opposed to the idea. They insisted on direct billing, even though it didn't make a lick of difference in terms of cost. He tried convincing them that no doctor in India would accept this arrangement with a foreign insurance company, but they wouldn't relent. At last, he said screw this, and went on a citywide search and finally found a top doctor in one of the most expensive hospitals in the city who was willing to operate on his knee with a letter of guarantee. The doctor also worked in 3 months of post-op physiotherapy costs into the surgery bill. The hospital, who had the best rooms, the best service, and the highest quality of care, the doctor worked with some of the top athletes in the country, and the final estimated cost was at least 700% more than the previous doctor. The insurance company didn't object and simply approved the surgery. He expected them to question the cost, but it was only around $8,000, which is the equivalent of like 4 ambulance rides in America. That must be a paltry sum for the company. At the end of the day, my cousin got the best care possible because of the insurance company's inexplicable insistence. Or maybe they had a good reason, but they lost money at the end of the day. 3. This malicious compliance happened years ago, and I remembered it while writing a YouTube comment. At the time, I was either in or just out of high school, and I made my money bagging groceries at the local supermarket. The job was very interesting, and there were a slew of terrible people employed at my location. But this story only has a cast of 2 people, me, the overworked, underpaid grocery bagger, and my butthole of a supervisor, Ray. Ray was an absolute twat to everyone in this store, and nobody liked him. His shenanigans actually birthed my first romantic relationship, but that's a story for another day. The way my day was at this job was I'd show up, clock in, and go up to whoever was supervising the front end that day. We had a rotation of 3 or 4 soups. And I was cool with almost all of them because I actually did my job, and asked them what the roster for the day looked like, who's here, when they're going home, if anyone's coming in breaks. I was particularly interested in my break time according to the roster, so I can plan my shift accordingly. Ray was one of those supervisors, and for some reason he hated when people would ask when their break was. Somebody would ask, and then he'd scream about, "When is your break time? I'll let you know." Which might have worked for the cashiers, but not us baggers, as we'd be all over the store and also out getting carts. One day I asked him when I'm supposed to go on my break, and he stopped me again to tell me he's in charge of the breaks. I say nothing and finish my shift. Cue malicious compliance. A few days later, he and I are working again. I know he's gonna scream about breaks again, so I just don't ask. After all, he'll let me know, right? So instead of talking to the supervisor, who that day was Ray, and letting him know I'm here, I just started working. And I continue working, and then I work some more. Finally, I realize 7 of my 8 hours has gone by and I haven't had a single break. But Ray never did let me know when it was my time for my break. A few minutes after I thought this, Ray somehow finds out I've been working 7 hours today with no break, and he comes running up, screaming at me about how I didn't take a break and how dare I, and the company's gonna get into major trouble because they worked me more than 7 hours without a break. I'm 90% sure I was under 18, so I was still a minor, and then asked why I never took my break. I responded with, "Well, Ray, you said you'd let me know when it was my time for my break, and you never let me know, so I never took a break." He exploded again and screamed at me to take my effing break now, and I finally took my 15-minute break, worked another hour before clocking out to go home. Ray kept being a butthole about everything, but he always gave me my break times in advance for the next few months, until he threw another fit at someone else and walked out of that store for good. Everyone else was completely amicable, and after Ray left, I had no problems with breaks again. Now, if anyone's wondering about that romantic relationship I mentioned, I'll just post it here too. Her and I met while working this job, and we both hated Ray for good reason. We started going to Taco Bell on our days off together to vent about Ray and his bullshit. Those Taco Bell trips turned into a friendship, then a relationship. We had a good time. I went with her to games, she was a Special Olympics gold medalist, and she came to my graduation. There was also talk, jokingly, about us getting married. We dated for a year, and then she broke up with me via Facebook Messenger, after telling me she cheated on me. That was also years ago, and she's reached out asking if I want to get back together a few times. But I'd honestly rather be single. Her family absolutely loved me, though, and they called her an idiot for breaking up with me. 4. I've been working with an automotive assembly plant for the past 2 years. My job is to coordinate the breakdown maintenance work, corrective jobs and maintenance work requests on the plant. If you've ever worked a maintenance job on a site, you know how it is. One day there is like no work at all, and some days the work will test your nerves. Most of the corrective maintenance I coordinate with different departments and shops is through WhatsApp groups. I've created WhatsApp groups with every shop team leaders and my team, and whenever there is an issue, my team gets a message with the problem described by the production staff, and then they attend to it immediately. The facility is pretty big and complex, and you definitely need phones to find someone if a maintenance breakdown occurs. Smartphones were allowed communication until a new admin manager joined. The new admin manager within a week sent an email on Saturday, facilities off on weekends, and most of the preventative activities are carried out, that as per company policy and to protect the company trade secrets, no smartphone is allowed on the site except for managers. I called my manager after reading the email and told him to please allow phones for maintenance staff, but he said he can't do shit about the decision and I have to follow what management decides. Actually, he also said, "You can't challenge the company policy and will oblige like others." I said okay and hung up. Here comes my malicious compliance. I took the screenshot of the email and sent it to all of my team on WhatsApp, and that his smartphones were no longer allowed. You are all requested to leave your phones in your lockers. On Monday morning, all of the system is started again, and usually the corrective complaints are high on most of the Mondays. I asked my maintenance team of every shop to continue the preventative maintenance activities as per plan, and attend the complaints when nobody from production approaches them. I also left my phone in my office drawer and left for visit on the plant. When I was on rounds, someone from the production staff saw me. They approached and described the problem, and I told them every time that someone from the team will be there soon. And no one did, as team was scattered on the plant. The whole day, the team attended only the problems they saw or were informed of in person. The result? Breakdown time percentage rose from 0.5% to 16% in one production phase. That's 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. I came to the office 12 p.m. after I visited every shop, and my manager asked where the hell I've been, as he's been calling my phone for hours and there's chaos on the production floor. I showed him the dirty, greasy hands that I'd been personally attending many complaints from different shops, and didn't even sit for 1 minute. I reminded him, "Sir, phones are no longer allowed on the production floor." That is why the complaint's attendance time skyrocketed. He was speechless and left. The whole day went like hell for production staff in almost all shops, and in the next morning, the presentation by maintenance was without any pictures, pics of corrective maintenance and preventative jobs attended on previous day. Without pictures, you'll never know about what corrective job the presenter is talking about, and the graph on the maintenance breakdown time was exponential. Next morning during presentation, the GM and CEO both were pissed, and around 10 a.m. I got a call on my desktop phone from the manager that from now on smartphones are allowed for the maintenance team. 5. Once upon a time, I was taught at a private school in Japan that was attached to a well-regarded university. It wasn't the JET program, but a similar setup in that native speakers were brought in to teach English conversation, listening and speaking, while Japanese teachers taught English grammar and writing. For those who don't know, many Japanese don't speak much English, but the way it's typically taught, mostly for university entrance exams, most Japanese can read and write English much better than they can speak and listen to it. So one day I get a new student, and he immediately introduces himself in fluent American teenager, aka English. He'd spent several years in the US, and his family sent him back to Japan to improve his Japanese and prepare him for university entrance exams. He was a cool kid, and I enjoy talking to him about music, television, and cultural things. I also excused him from most activities in my class since they were below his level, and I had let him read books in English while I worked with the other students, and he often jumped in as an assistant, helping his classmates alongside me. I also turned a deaf ear when he taught his classmates dirty words, because that's important information, even if it isn't appropriate for me to teach them. One time I was trying to correct the pronunciation of the word election, as there was an election at the time. Most of my students were pronouncing it incorrectly, and I was trying my damnedest to get them to understand the difference between election and erection. The student finally jumped in and explained in Japanese what it was, and after a very good laugh, their pronunciation improved. Whatever works, man. But I digress. Everything's great, and we had no issues. I truly enjoyed having him in class. One day he came in very happy and told me how he finally got out of his Japanese English class. Like I mentioned earlier, students also take English with a Japanese teacher in grammar, reading, and writing. And let me tell you, I fully believe many Japanese have a much better understanding of English grammar than native speakers. Typically, we know when something's wrong but can't explain why. Many Japanese could tell you exactly why it's wrong, but I digress again. Obviously, the class was also far below his level, but his teacher made him participate, and even snatched his book from him and hit him with it when he was caught off task. Teachers hitting a kid isn't unheard of, but not common either. In revenge, this kid does as he's told, and starts participating by constantly correcting his teacher's work on the board, worksheets, etc., all to the amusement of his peers. Finally, the teacher told him to shut the hell up and just read his book. He only had to take the exams, which was fine with him. He's happy, and I enjoyed hearing about how he stuck it to his teacher, a man I rather disliked myself. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 157. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. And before you go, if you please hit the like button on the way out, and share the video around on all your social media, to all your friends and family. Right, let's see. We have a little birthday shout out to do today. I think I'm a little bit late with it. Yeah, I am. Should have been on Thursday. Yeah. This should have been on Thursday. But, well, better late than never. We'll catch up now. Okay, and today's shout out goes to Aunt Gigi. And Aunt Gigi is 37 years old. They were 37 on Thursday there. Hope you had a very good birthday, Aunt Gigi. And as I'm allowing, given that I've been remiss due to, illness, COVID-related illness stuff, I am allowing people to celebrate for the whole month. So you can celebrate your birthday right through to next month, since I forgot to give you a shout out today. And that is good in a court of law in which I am the judge. So there we go. Right, now before we go, I'd like to sing happy birthday to you if I may. Then we'll have a question of the day. So here we go. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Aunt Gigi. Happy birthday to you. All right, now let's see. Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, what holiday, if you consider it a holiday, are you more excited for? Halloween or Christmas? Personally, these days, although I don't get very excited for either of them, I'm probably slightly more excited for Christmas because there's a possibility that this year, hopefully, I don't know for sure, that we'll get a Doctor Who Christmas Day special. As it should be, because the current showrunner, the outgoing showrunner, seems to really hate Christmas. And although there was a special, it would always be a week later, and it just doesn't matter at that point. That's my personal preference. So do you have a preference? Maybe the magic of Halloween, carving the pumpkins and scaring children away from your house, or whatever it is you like to do, appeals to you a lot more. So let me know what you think in a comment below. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.